All right. Hey, everyone, and thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. Today with me, I have Eva Steortz. After 20 years as a Disney executive, Eva's new dream come true career is supporting clients in creating their own happily ever after. She's also the author of From the Outhouse to the Mouse House, Crap You Need to Know for a Dream Come True Career. Eva Steortz, that is a great name for your book, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So let's start by setting the table. Tell us a little bit about your background as a Disney exec and how that kind of, what did the journey look like to get to where you are now and become a coach?
Well, like the title of my book, I'm very proud of my roots, like you, growing up in the country. I grew up in West Virginia. And my grandmother actually had an outhouse. And, it's not an affluent state, but I loved going there because it was so adventurous and fun. And, I always knew I wanted to move to a bigger city, but I always wanted to take those roots with me. Just the whole idea of adventure and loving life and having fun.
Yep.
And so in college, I studied advertising and I was having so much fun. I went straight through for my master's degree and I decided to do my thesis on product placement in film because I studied advertising. And I thought it was just interesting that, celebrities were using products in the movies. And I wondered if that could be quantified and used in advertising. And so I was intrigued by it, but what I didn't realize is that there was no research done, and that research would get published in Adweek, Wall Street Journal, like tons and tons of places. And I was able to leverage that to get interviews in Hollywood, even though I'm in like rural West Virginia.
That's great. That's awesome.
Well, so when I'm working with college students, which I do a lot, I tell them the papers that you write in school matter, and you should pick topics that you're interested in, that you can start networking then with people that might hire you someday. And so I was able to get interviews. It did take a while to get a job, and my first job was in research, which makes sense because I had done research. And then I did product placement for years, which I thought I wanted to do, and I ended up going to MGM and home entertainment, which wasn't on my list. So that's another thing I always advise people is even though you have a path, you have to keep your mind open and your eyes open and basically say yes. I know there's controversy about saying yes these days, but I mostly always say yes. And that's how I got into Disney, because I got some home entertainment experience and there was an opening at Disney. And because I'd had the experience, I was able to get in. And my timing was amazing. I got to work on the first release of Lion King. And from then, my goal was to navigate and move around and meet people and learn as much as possible. And it's a big company. And so I was there 20 years, but never doing the same job more than 3 years because there's just so many fun things to do. So having been there so long, people started coming to me and asking me for career advice. And I think that's kind of how this path to becoming an executive coach started, because people just started coming to me and they actually started calling me mama, which I don't use in my coaching practice, but I've just been at Disney for so darn long. And when I got laid off in 2012, I wrote the book that you referenced because, it was just such an amazing career. I wanted to capture all of those lessons and all of those, great leaders that I worked for. And I wanted to capture it and be able to share it. I knew it was magic. And so I didn't know even if I would publish the book at that time, but I definitely knew I wanted to record it while it was all still fresh in my mind. And so that's kind of like the path that led me here.
That's great. Unrelated, but if I may just interject and say on behalf of all Gen X millennial cusp kids, thank you for The Lion King. It was a big part of my childhood.
I don't know that there's been one that was quite so powerful sense. And I've loved a lot of them, but there is something very, very magical about that one.
Yep. Yeah, it was great. Cool. So people were coming to you at Disney for career advice, and that kind of naturally led into this. Was it something that you just loved doing right off the bat? Was it something that you grew into?
I did love it. I did love sharing wisdom, and I was a leader, so I had a team, and that was always like my favorite part. Managing the career of other people and inspiring them to go for promotions and aim higher. And so, it was really cool when other people started coming to me as well. And I also started doing guest lectures because people had been so generous to me when I was a student. And I just felt like it was important to give back, and to be able to help other people who are starting out, getting their degrees, figuring out what they wanted to do. And so I still do that on a regular basis. I guest lecture at UCLA, USC, Pepperdine, and I always offer to LinkedIn with me, and I offer to mentor them. And it's surprising that more people don't take me up on it, but I'm very genuinely interested in helping people, maximize their careers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Who are your clients today?
It's pretty broad, interestingly, like VPs of finance, SVPs of sales. But the majority are in entertainment or marketing or some creative background, I think, because that's what my network is. And, I don't know if we're going to get into it. I'm a relatively new formal coach. I went back and went to school, and I'm ICF certified. So I've been formally coaching for about a year and a half. And all of my clients come through my network and LinkedIn. So I think that's why most of them tend to be in the entertainment or marketing kind of fields.
Yeah. What are you doing on LinkedIn that attracts people to, reach out and contact you, ask you, basically how do I become a client of yours? What are you doing on LinkedIn that's getting people to engage and kind of reach out to you and inquire about coaching? I think a lot of listeners, a lot of people listening to this podcast, right, or watching it on YouTube or whatever channel they're taking it in on, are, everyone's on LinkedIn, and maybe they just don't know what to do, or they've tried doing certain things and the wheels are spinning in the mud, or whatever analogy you choose, so I'm curious to know what you're doing on there that's working so well.
Well, I'm still experimenting and figuring it out, honestly, but I've kind of decided that it's a combination of sales and marketing. So marketing would be posting an article that you found interesting that had insightful advice that you want to share. And I write articles too. So I write articles on, I have several topics, but I love networking. I love positive mindset, and I love, motivation and productivity. So I write articles on those topics and post them. And then I also try to do a lot of commenting and liking and cheering other people on. So that's kind of marketing, like being on there all the time and present and adding value.
Sure.
But what I learned kind of the hard way is that doesn't equal clients.
Yep.
And so what equals clients is the sales. And that's when I post my bio, like a JPEG of my bio, and state what I'm doing and say, I'm looking for referrals. And only when you ask for that, you get clients. And it almost, I do it at least once a month, and every time I get a few clients. So I learned kind of the hard way. It's a combination. You can't do that every day, or that's going to be rather obnoxious.
Sure.
But so I add value, I write articles, I comment, I'm part of the community. And then once a month or so, I'm like, oh, by the way, here's my bio, send me referrals. And that's working.
And specifically, you're asking for referrals. You're not saying I need clients or be my client. You're asking for referrals.
Yes. And I started doing that because in my coach training, it was very clear that it's easier to coach somebody that you don't know. because then you're not coming with preconceived notions. And so I started doing that because I didn't want to coach the people that were within my network. I wanted to coach people that they knew that I didn't know. And so I've just kept doing that. I really haven't coached anyone that I know particularly well within my network. I just sort of, I barter with some other coaches, which I think is interesting, but I haven't coached anyone that I consider someone who's pretty close to me.
In terms of the end result that you're getting, and that being several clients a month, how important is the wording? How important is the verbiage of your post, your ask, send me referrals? How important is that, do you think? Beyond just, doing better work with someone you don't know. Does that question make sense?
I think it makes sense. So basically, the wording needs to be direct, because I also have an email list of about 500 people that I've worked with over the years. And I thought that was going to be gold, because I'd read a bunch of articles and listened to podcasts, and your email list is your gold. That never worked for me. But if I go back and think about it, I'm like, I'm now a coach. Here's my topics. Think of me if anyone needs a coach. It only works if you're very, very specific. I offer a complimentary session. Please send me referrals. Like it has to be like straight up front. You can't bury it in a bunch of flowery, language. It has to be very short and very direct.
Yeah, I like that. A lot of, I don't think you or me or anyone listening has probably had the pleasure of not receiving awful marketing messages on LinkedIn.
Oh my gosh. I started getting, I always write back, or at least I try to, because I get a lot of solicitations on LinkedIn. So I always try to be respectful, because I do some solicitation on there. Yeah, but my least favorite is if somebody says, oh, we have a lot of connections in common. I'd love to connect. And we have 0 connections in common. 0. Or if they're offering me something that's completely off base that I have no need for, obviously, based on what I do. So I think a lot of people are misusing LinkedIn. So yeah, for sure, that's a turnoff.
Yeah, definitely. What sorts of things did you struggle with when you first became a coach? And how did you overcome those struggles? Question part 2.
Asking for money has been a big challenge for me, because I did it for free. Now you could call that mentoring more than coaching, because I wasn't a formal executive coach. But I spent so much decades now giving back and considering it part of what I love to help people with their careers. And I do a lot of volunteering for places like Dress for Success. And so it was a combination of giving back and literally what I chose for my philanthropic efforts. So asking people for money was a big transition for me, even though I'd been a marketing consultant and I have no problem doing a proposal and asking for money for that. So that's taken me a while to get used to. But I'm good now.
How do you, so for new coaches out there listening to this, what advice would you give them for overcoming that? Because I think it's not really just even a coaching and consulting thing, right? That's a struggle for any new entrepreneur or solopreneur, or whatever you want to call it, is, taking what usually starts out as a hobby, right? And then turning around and asking for money for it is a mindset shift that I think a lot of people perhaps struggle with. Do you have advice for newbies out there that want to make that shift?
Yeah, I think it's because I think what's most helpful is recognizing the value that you're adding. And not only do you have training and experience, but you're holding space for somebody to make a change that they obviously have come to you for support. And so I think just really zeroing in on how you can literally change somebody's life, the course of their next career or promotion. It really rides on the work that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and that they've come to you. Like, before you ask for money, you've had a discussion, and they're seeking your support, and that
Mm-hmm.
has value. And so that helped a lot. And then I got a lot of advice from other coaches that said, if people don't pay, they don't pay attention.
Yep.
And I have found that mostly to be true, and they should be paying amount that is, a significant investment.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's helped too. Like, a lot of people gave me the advice to don't say, say investment, like your investment in this coaching will be not your fee
Yep.
or, money, but it's an investment
Mm-hmm.
in time, and willingness to change that they're making, and they're seeking you as their collaborative partner in that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's an important, very important point, and one that we discuss on this podcast every so often, with some regularity, and one, incidentally, that is also backed by science and consumer psychology. That you're gonna get better results if you are invested in it, and typically some kind of financial investment. Honestly, one that maybe hurts a little bit. It's difficult, if you don't have just all the money lying around. If you've got to, work and struggle to kind of make that happen, then you don't want to throw that money away, right? So you're going to be more emotionally invested along with it as well.
Right. It's part of the commitment,
Yeah.
and I think that's other helpful advice that I got. Like, when you're doing the contract with the client, you send the invoice too, and that's part of the contract, is the commitment that this is
Hmm.
a business arrangement,
Hmm.
And that helped a lot too, to think of it as a business. I still do a lot of pro bono work, but executive coaching is now my business. So we're entering a business agreement.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Tell us about some big wins. Tell us about some big wins that you've had in your coaching career.
I think one of the ones that I'm most proud of, and this is a very typical story because so many people were laid off over the last year and a half, related to COVID.
Hmm.
So I think the biggest wins are when somebody comes and they've forgotten their value and their strength, and they've literally taken personally the layoff,
Hmm.
and be able to support someone in remembering all that they've achieved in their career and their strengths, and to basically just get somebody back up on their feet and um, ready for their next move.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of transactional stuff with supporting people on LinkedIn and their resume and all of that. But I think the most rewarding work for me is helping people get their confidence back. You
Hmm.
know, and then I also really enjoy helping people get promoted. You
Hmm.
know, um, I have a lot of ambitious people that come and say, okay, I really want to get promoted. Help me figure out what I need to do with my boss. I
Hmm.
love that kind of work. And I have helped people do that. And then they come back and say, okay, now I have 10 people. I've never had a team. Help me figure out what kind of culture I want to have. What kind of communication cadence do I want to have? How do I set my priorities? And so oftentimes when you help a client with one thing, it can lead into, the next thing that they're evolving in their career. So that's also been incredibly rewarding when you help someone achieve something and then they come back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Can we talk a little bit about your kind of methodologies? What does an engagement with a client look like when, let's say, the client, wants to get promoted? What does that engagement look like, and what sort of, exercises or tactics or strategy do you work on those kind of clients with?
I like to start from the beginning, and it might not be a surprise because the name of my book, From the Outhouse, like, I really like to, no matter what a client wants to achieve, I like to go back to the beginning, where
Hmm.
they're from, what did they learn from growing up there, what did they learn from their parents, and what kind of themes have they seen throughout their life that have generated extreme success or extreme happiness in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And once you kind of zero in on what that is, helping them figure out how to use that to get where they want to be.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the personal part of the journey. But then from my experience in my career, and then watching all the amazing leaders that I've worked with, for me, it always boils down to some pretty simple fundamentals. And it's really relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you want to get promoted, who are the important stakeholders you need to start developing relationships with and building allyship with?
Yeah.
And then the other thing, relationships, and then like positivity. What is your current perception? Like, what do people currently say about you? And what do you want them to say about you, to be considered for this promotion? And helping someone start building their brand to become, who they need to be to get promoted.
Yeah.
And then lastly, motivation. Like, what's it going to take? And are you ready to make those necessary steps? You might have to, and when I got promoted at Disney, I actually went to HR and said, I would like a coach. I'm eager to maximize my career here. I want to understand what I need to work on. I did a 360. And then whatever that came back from that, I took very seriously and made changes. So, are you motivated to start making moves like that, to really understand what you need to do to get to that next level? And you have to ask for it, get prepared to ask for it and then take action.
Yeah, that's great. It harkens back to the once a month call for referrals on LinkedIn. You're not going to get it if you don't ask for it, and you got to ask for it sometimes. Don't be afraid to.
Yeah, it's so funny because a lot of people want to get promoted, and it's like, well, who have you talked to about it? Nobody. So you have to start by talking to people, like, people you have existing relationships with, and then figure out who you need to have relationships with. At Disney, it was crazy because it wasn't just your boss that was important. It was like a committee. Like you had to have pretty unanimous support in your department to get promoted. And so, you have to figure out in your company or your circumstance, like, who are those people and what is their current perception and what do I need to overcome?
Mm-hmm. So when you're working with clients, then do you do like a 360-degree assessment to help them kind of, I don't know, give them context about where they're at and how they're perceived?
Not yet. I definitely want to get certified in something. But what's interesting is my executive coach at Disney didn't use like a Hudson or a Creative Circle or whatever it's called. Like, she didn't use any of the tools that are famous. She actually created her own. And I've been networking with employee development people at different companies in LA, and they say, oh yeah, that'd be fine too. So depending on, and then you can customize it. And that's what my coach did, customized it very specifically for who I was, what my strengths were. And like the questions were really, tell me your perceptions of Eva. What would it take? What does a vice president mean to you at Disney? What does that skill require? Does Eva have it? What would she need to do to get it? It was very, very, very specific. And so I'm still kind of working on, will I get certified in the formal ones that are the most popular, or will I try to create something myself?
Yeah. Does Eva have a coach right now?
Yes. I have someone who's supervising me. I don't know if you know about career supervision, but that's what I'm doing currently with someone who is on the faculty where I went back to school at Fielding University. So we have a supervision call every other week where I talk about, how I'm doing and, what's happening with me when a client brings something up. And, it's really helpful. I think if you're a coach, you should definitely have a coach.
What is career supervision? I'm not familiar with the phrase.
It's relatively new. Coaching supervision is you can get certified in that to
Hmm.
supervise other coaches to help
Oh,
them hone their skills.
okay.
And so that's, she's a coach who's specializes in coaching other coaches.
Okay. Coaching supervision, not career supervision.
Yes, coaching
Okay.
supervision. Um, and I have been thinking about getting a business consultant
Hmm.
for my coaching practice because I'm still relatively new.
Hmm.
And I'm also trying a coach who uses hypnotherapy later today. So, yes, I have a coach, and yes, I love coaching and think we should all partake in all different kinds of coaching.
Like that you're experimenting with different stuff and trying, new things out with the hypnotherapy. That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe in everything.
Nice. So I want to circle back to something you said earlier in our chat about when you work with a client, you want to start from the beginning and learn about like you mentioned, like where they grew up and things like that. How does that help you steer them in the right direction, or how does that help you coach them?
Well, it's interesting because I have found that things stick with us throughout our whole life.
Hmm.
And from my growing up, it was I grew up in a blue collar family, and
Hmm.
so I value hard work,
Hmm.
and I know that about myself. And so when working with somebody else, you've got to find out what is their values, how do they define success, uh, what what was rewarded when they
Hmm.
were growing up and in their early days. So I just feel like that always carries forward with us, and then it starts to create themes in our life. you know
Mm.
I actually wrote about it in my book. I got caught in the trap because I grew up blue collar, that I thought hard work equals success. Well, that's not true. You know, you don't get promoted for working 20 hours a day at all. You get promoted for having good relationships, being innovative, being inspiring, being positive, coming up with solutions to problems. And so, that is sort of like something that I had to overcome. And so by going
Mhm.
back to the beginning with clients, you find not only like their values and their missions and their strengths, but you might also find something that they need to overcome, you know?
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, that's great. I like the idea of a promotion or something along those lines. Success within the social realm could essentially come down to two things, right? Relationships and results, whatever results you come up with, and the relationships that you have with people. And maybe that splinters off into smaller subsections, but I feel like that, yeah, that tracks to me a lot.
Well, the other interesting thing is to ask somebody what they started studying in school, and did they
Mhm.
change degrees? Um, or are they even working in what they studied? Because there's also a nugget there about what they wanted to be when they grew up, you
Uh-huh.
know? Because I started as a physical therapist, but I had to change majors because I couldn't do trigonometry, you know? But I wanted to be a physical therapist because I have a real passion for helping people, you
Uh-huh.
know? And so I came back to that in my 50s. And so I always ask somebody, and there's most often an interesting story that accompanies what they started studying, what they ended up getting the degree in, and what they did in their life. And if you can go back to, why did you want to be that? You
Uh-huh.
know, also there's lots of nuggets in there about what would be most fulfilling and how they might find the most joy and happiness, as they're changing or transitioning in their career.
So, okay. This might be a great idea or a terrible idea. Would you be open to having a little chat with me right now and just talking about my past and so that we can hear you kind of work through that and see what you can make of my strange and disparate past?
Sure, why not? Let's try it. Yeah.
You want to do that? Is that all right? Okay. So where should I'll let you run the show for a little bit. You can ask me questions and I'll respond to you.
All right. Awesome. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what you took from growing up in that place.
Okay. So I grew up with a single mom in small town capital Salem, Oregon. I spent almost all my summers and sometimes a decent chunk of school year as well with family on a 700-acre grass seed farm in Independence, Oregon. What I took from that, obviously, my mother was a single mom. She was a nurse. She worked nights a lot. At a grass seed farm, a 700-acre one that's family owned. It's hard work all the way around. So there's just a lot of hard work around me. And again, like you said earlier, blue collar, hard work equals success. I think that was a big takeaway from me. And I've struggled in the past with working smarter and not harder, I guess you could say.
And what was the best advice that your mom gave you growing up?
Best advice that my mom gave me growing up? Man, I don't know that she's given me a bunch of advice. She was a very loving woman, but she had some emotional and mental issues. So it was that things were a little unsteady on that end. But one of the things that I took away from her definitely is just kind of the idea of unconditional love and affection. She was a very loving and well-intentioned mother, for sure.
That's amazing. And so, what strength do you have today that you attribute to growing up with a loving, hardworking mom who sometimes was a little unstable?
A little cuckoo. I think loyalty. I'm incredibly loyal. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And how does that support your success right now in your companies?
We fight hard for our clients. When we make a promise, well, first of all, circling back to the LinkedIn marketers, we will never approach a prospect and promise them the moon. If someone's promising you the moon, they're probably lying, especially in the marketing realm. So we just don't do that. But we will work extremely hard for our clients, and just we've got each other's back. We've got a great, great, great company culture. Everyone has fun. Like I said, we've always got each other's back. There's no gossiping or stuff like that you might find that I've found. I worked at Intel for a few years. I worked at McAfee for a few years, and some of those big corporate cultures, there's a lot of social dynamics, politics, gossip. We don't have any of that, which is fresh air.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love the loyalty and the hard working. It sounds like you've built that culture into your current life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hardworking and loyal. I love it. And what did you want to be when you grew up as a young man?
I remember, in the fourth grade, maybe I wanted to be a baseball player.
Field of dreams. You're out there in the fields.
Yeah. Then I ended up being not very good at baseball. I ended up being quite good at hockey. So I wanted to be a hockey player for a while. But I was very good with computers. So out of high school, I went to college for 1 year after high school to work towards a music business degree. I was a very musical child. My mother claims that when I was 3 years old or 4 years old or something like that, I would dance around in the living room with a tiny little broom and sing the entire movie South Pacific. The whole thing. The whole thing. And so, I grew up on Elvis, the Beatles, Patsy Cline. So I was a musical child, wanted to be a musician for a little while. But I didn't end up graduating school until 2000. 2011, and my degree at that time was in Japanese language and literature. So this is what I was interested in seeing, how you're going to pick this apart, because my past is quite disparate and just weird.
Yeah, I think it probably works best if I understand what goal you're trying to work towards now, because then we can your goal. It's hard to coach somebody without establishing like what it is that they're looking to achieve.
What's the end game? Yeah.
And I will say that I don't think I've had someone with that much, yeah, I mean, fields and single mom and nurse and medical and then music and then hockey and then Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot. This might take more than one session.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate you being game to the ask, though. It was kind of fun.
It's also just a really good way to get somebody comfortable and comfortable talking about themselves, because
open up a little bit
about our childhood, and also to bring forward the emotionality. Like, a lot of clients come with a transactional thing. I want to get promoted. But you've got to get them to an emotional place where they're willing to open up about, some insecurities, some things in the past that they have been holding on to that aren't serving them. And so starting at the beginning, you get to know somebody and they open up, and you often will go back and say, oh yeah, I remember you told me that your mom was a single mother. So she must have had to work really, really, really hard. How does that play into your challenge of work-life balance right now, for instance? Because work-life balance is a topic that comes up with almost every single client,
Yeah.
Especially now after the year we had. Like, how can I be successful but still have time for my family, my friends, my pets, my exercise, my vacations? So, had I not asked you about your childhood, I wouldn't know that, you had a single mom and, she worked her butt off to take care of you. And so, now you work your butt off. So
learned behaviors.
Yeah.
Fascinating. How do you have any tricks? Well, that's kind of a loaded word. How do you get people to open up when you meet with someone new, and because you want to get them to open up to you, to be vulnerable, to tell the truth? Is there a way that you go about that, or do you just straight up just ask simple questions, or?
Well, I send my questionnaire ahead of time.
Okay.
And so the first question is, tell me where you grew up and what that meant to you and what you learned from your parents. So I usually start there, but I also, like with you, I see your dogs in the background. And so I will just ask them something about, I see you went to school here. I see you have dogs. How many do you have? And so you really want to start on sort of a human connection level, always, in everything, coaching, interviewing, always, I can't think of a situation where you don't want to just be a human talking to another human, right?
Yeah, I like that. One of the ways that if I need someone to open up to me is I'll open up to them first. And I think that, if you can share some vulnerability about yourself, I think it's a kind of a hack, I guess, to get the other person to open up. They'll open up a little easier as well, because then you're kind of puts you on kind of, level footing, so to speak.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good tip too.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about your book, From the Outhouse to the Mouse House: Crap You Need to Know for a Dream Come True Career. Unfortunately, I have not had the pleasure of reading this yet. But I would, if you would just maybe chat a little bit about it, maybe give us a synopsis and what are kind of why did you write the book?
Well, I wrote the book because I had a 20-year amazing career and it seemed too special not to share.
Mhm.
And also, it was just, I learned so much. It was like, just leadership lessons galore. And so that's why I wrote it. And it's very short. It's literally I think it's 110 pages. You can read it in an hour. There's
Mhm.
also 7 exercises in there to help people think through, what do they want to achieve? What's holding them back? What are their
Mhm.
strengths? Um, and it's basically just filled with prompts about what's important. And I did boil it down into like little chapters of, the 3 things that I found were important for a successful career: relationships, positivity, and motivation. So I
Mhm.
tell little stories about leaderships that role modeled great relationships and networking. Like, probably the best advice I ever got was from one of my bosses who said, never have lunch alone.
Mhm.
I mean, he took that to the nth degree. He had breakfast, lunch, happy hour, dinner. He never did a project that he didn't reach out to like 10 stakeholders to get their input. Like, he was
Uh-huh.
a relationship kind of like guru.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so, I talk about, I always have a leader in the lessons, like, positivity, having the ability when business is down to walk in a room and lift people back up. No, don't
Mhm.
beat them up, lift them up and
Mhm.
help them see the solutions and the way forward. So I have several little stories in there about leaders that represented just pure positivity and how they use that as a power to drive business. And then motivation, I talk a lot about that because even though I had like a really strong human resource department and I was able to go get myself a coach,
Mhm.
you've got to be self motivated in your career. And like, you have to create it, you have to
Mhm.
make it happen, you have to ask for it. And so I also like break down a bunch of little stories um, on the topic of motivation. And then I love quotes. So, there's tons and tons of inspirational quotes. And it's just super short. And it's
Mhm.
intended to be simple because I truly believe having a successful career is simple if you
Mhm.
do focus on relationships and networking, staying positive and idea and solution oriented, and just being bold enough to ask for it and make the moves that you need to make, because
Mhm.
we almost all know what we're supposed to do, we just don't do it. So how can you motivate yourself to stretch beyond your comfort zone, to ask for the promotion, to ask for the raise, to ask for the special assignment? um, and so the book is short and simple because I truly believe that life can be as simple as that.
That's great. So I love the idea of never eat lunch alone. I think that's a great, just kind of relationship building maxim. In the year 2021, where we're at right now, there's more and more people working from home. Now that I mean, COVID has passed us, so people will arguably be moving back into office buildings, but at the same time, a lot of people will probably stay home and continue to work remotely. Um, I know I've got some friends that have, and myself actually, have chosen to move out of the cities, and work remotely in that way. How how important is it to build new relationships and maintain old ones? And how can how can new how can remote workers make that happen?
I actually think the biggest gift of 2021 was being forced to use Zoom.
Mhm.
Uh, and I'm a great networker, but I was doing it in person. But
Mhm.
guess what? Now I network. I went back to my college days. I literally had a Zoom with my friends from my freshman year at college. And
Mhm.
they're, in Hong Kong and Oregon and like all over the world. I couldn't have lunch with them. It's not
Mhm.
feasible. But the beauty of Zoom is that we can go all the way back and find people that we've lost touch with. Like, one guy that I was super close with works at Nike. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could coach at Nike someday. Um, and I do a lot of phone calls now too, because Zoom fatigue is real.
Yeah.
So I'll just ask people to do 15-minute phone calls. And I
Mm-hmm.
love networking with strangers. I ask my clients to do it, so I make myself do it too. I listened to a podcast where Will Smith was being interviewed. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in love with Will Smith all over again. And so I went on LinkedIn and found someone in marketing at his company and just said, I just listened to this interview. I'm fascinated. Can we talk for 15 minutes? I want to learn about the culture of Will's production company. I'm just fascinated. So networking with strangers over the phone is
Mm-hmm.
fun. I do this thing called Lunch Club, which I highly, highly recommend. It got very popular over COVID, and it's like a dating service, but it's for professionals. And you fill out a questionnaire. It's like Match.com. You fill out a
Mm-hmm.
questionnaire, and then AI matches you with another professional with similar interests that you wouldn't meet in your normal day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done it about 30, 40 times now. And it's fast. I got a client that way.
That's pretty
Uh,
cool.
yeah, I've made like really cool friends that way. And sometimes, even if you don't have a connection where there's a mutual benefit in business, like one of the women I met, she's like, oh yeah, I got to go because my son's graduating with a degree in toy design. I'm like, toy design? I worked at Disney. I know 5 toy designers. And so I was able to hook her son up with tons of toy designers. So you don't know, you
Yeah.
know, the mutual value and the fun that you're going to have by meeting strangers. And so now I'm just a huge, huge advocate of like networking with strangers.
That's awesome. And that's called Lunch Club?
It's called Lunch Club. Cannot recommend it enough. It's so easy. You fill out a questionnaire, you fill out what times you can meet, and then the computer matches you and sends you a Zoom link.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. We will add, for those listening to this podcast, we'll add that to the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
We'll find a link to it. Can we talk for a moment about toy design? I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, you can get degrees in it.
That's so cool.
Otis, which is a college here, art and design college, you can get a degree in it. And that school is a feeder school to Mattel and Hasbro. And there's like 5 toy companies in LA. You can get a degree in how to make a toy.
I'm going back to school tomorrow. That sounds amazing.
Why not?
That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the other kind of thing. I do a lot of work with college students, but I do a lot of work with people in their 50s who are like, I'm doing this, but I'm not fulfilled. And then we go all the way. What did you want to be when you grew up? Oh, you wanted to cook? Why don't you go back to school and be a chef? Anything is possible, so.
Yeah. Toy design.
I see it in your future.
It's awesome. Problem solved. Cool. So circling back to your book, would you say then that your book is more on the tactical side of things or the mindset kind of strategy side of things? Or maybe a kind of an equal blend of both?
I actually think it's pretty tactical, honestly.
Yeah.
It's tips. It's like basically practical tips for how to have a dream come true career, but it's told in the context of stories.
Mm-hmm.
One of my other favorite stories is Bring Your Heart to Work. And it kind of reminds me of your loyalty story about you and how you run your company. And one of my favorite bosses, never lost sight of his why, and he was actually the head of toys when I was at Disney. And, we didn't always make our number and people would lose their minds. The finance people would be going crazy. And he would always be like, okay, hold on. Why do we make toys? Oh, you're right, Tim. We make toys because we want to make kids and families happy. Yes. And so he always brought back the purpose. And he was also just super personal, knew everybody's name, walked around with his shoes off, just like regular. We're here to work, but we're also here to support each other and have fun.
That is great leadership. I feel like if you're, if the team is on the struggle bus and someone is able to come back in and remind people why you're there, that, something like, if, especially when the answer is bringing happiness to children, that's instant clarity. Just no questions asked.
I know. And even the finance guy who was beating the table is like smiling now, right? I mean,
for sure. He has to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Tons of little stories like that. And, they're leadership lessons, but they're told in like real world stories of things that stuck with me and will always stick with me as big reminders about how to really, really have a dream come true career is having fun with other people, taking risks, challenging the rules. Like there's a whole like stories about the times where we've truly innovated, is when somebody broke a rule, So there's all kinds of like nuggets in there, reminders about, how to really break through and not only be successful and get promoted, but have fun,
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to order my copy right after this.
I want to hear like what your favorite tips are from it.
I'll report back to you. All right, Eva, this is fantastic. I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything that I didn't hit on that you would like us to cover?
No, outside of just reminding your readers that no matter where they are in their career, aim a little bit higher. And whatever it is that you're holding back on, don't hold back anymore. Like 2020 was a beautiful big silver reset button. So reset the button, and whatever you are looking to achieve, just start putting in motion and make it happen. There's no more waiting, because this is not guaranteed. We found that out, so make the most of every day.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Eva, where can our listeners and viewers connect with you online?
If you can spell my last name, which will be in the notes, you can find me easily on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can find my website because my last name's unusual, so I'm easy to find.
Awesome. It's Eva Steortz, EvaSteortz. Yeah, that's it. Eva, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate it.
It was fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And thank you to all you guys for listening and watching. We will see you next time.